or the way they do and the way they live. Should I say no? Doesn't change. Makes them to live better, but with the same particular cultural understanding.
I was going to say, Jesus' culture never accepted him.
Sorry?
His culture, Jesus' culture at his time. They never accepted him. He came to his own didn't receive him.
Yeah, because I mean, again, his particular message was almost in paradox too. One, they were looking for a political Messiah. Jesus was a Messiah for the world. They were looking for a national liberator. Jesus was liberating the universe. So obviously, they had a particular worldview of what this Messiah is going to be, and that is why when Jesus said, kind of, he is God, they wanted to stone him. When he forgave sin, they wanted to stone him, because how can a man be God? And therefore, they said crucify him, because the particular title that he was, Jesus, King of the Jews.
I think in Romans 1 verse 16, the Bible say that Jesus came for the Jew first. So how do we explain that? And then for the non-Jews?
Yeah. We must not read it in terms of chronological, that the Jews are more important than the Gentiles. Remember, I didn't make mention, in the fullness of time, God sent his Son. Jerusalem was center of the world. The Roman Empire established itself, and infrastructure was developed for this radical spread of the gospel. The fact that Jews receive the gospel first doesn't give them preeminence or a state over the Gentiles. That's how in the reality, the gospel was presented to the Jews first. But again, when we understand the Jews, we understand it was a diaspora. They all ascended to Jerusalem, right? And you had Ethiopian Jews, you had Jews from every part of the world who gathered in Jerusalem with the gospel when Peter proclaimed the gospel. And so what we said was Jews were the first to hear it. It is by no means that they have monopoly over the gospel. So it's just showing a particular transition, again because of the situatedness of the Roman Empire. Okay, so Niran, Rodney, any comments before we move on? Niran, you there? Rodney?
No, I'm fine, thanks.
Okay.
No, thank you.
Lovely.
Thank you. From my side.
No.
Nothing from my side.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Sorry, Linda.
Yes, sir. I was going to say in Acts chapter 1, when the disciples came to him saying, is this now the time at which you are going to restore the kingdom to the Jews? And so he said, no, it is not about what you are saying. It is not for you to know the signs and times which are fit to the Father's authority, but rather you need to wait for the Holy Spirit and He
Come upon you.
Yes.
Because they were looking for a different kingdom, right?
Yeah, the
They're
Messiah.
looking for an earthly kingdom, a political kingdom rather than
Yeah,
a
a
heavenly
Messiah.
and a special kingdom. Yeah. And so that particular worldview, right through the Old Testament, creates this notion that the Messiah that's going to come is going to be this political Messiah. But then let's go into our lecture. And again, the objective is to understand culture and to understand how culture impacts our understanding of life and the way we do life, and to move away from what we call ethnocentric mindsets. I trust by the end of this particular culture that you will respect your culture, but you will also respect the culture of the other, rather than say my culture is better than yours, because the reality is that culture is dynamic. And culture is not because of environment, it is a learned thing, passed on from generation to generation. For example, I can be, you can put me in an Indian home and I will speak like an Indian, but you take the same Godfrey at birth and place him in a Zulu home, I'll sound pretty much like a Zulu. And because the cultural context will be taught to me, and therefore I will adapt to that particular culture. So it's important to understand that the culture is always living, it's always dynamic. And so craft again in culture, you want us to understand that that culture itself is quite a complex thing. You know, we think we figured it out. We understand someone's culture, we understand the person, but it's complex. Sometimes you don't understand your own culture. Right? And then that's a reality. There's certain things that I do in the context of my so-called culture, I do it, but I don't understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because I'm not questioning it. Unless something happens, okay, is this really what I need to do? And so it's important that the world culture is complex, and complex because the shared meanings, we have values, we have practices, and he says that culture therefore is not static, it is always moving, it is dynamic, it is consistently evolving. Why do your parents have issues with you? I mean, why do you have issues with your children?
Because our cultures is different. I mean, our times of understanding the culture is different.
Yeah, because cultures are mixed. Like, from my experience, I grew up in Cape Town, and so there's a lot of conflicting ideas of what one should do. So, as an example, when I visited Congo 2 years ago, I found out that I'm not allowed to greet older people by
shaking your
offering
hands.
my hand.
Right, okay.
I have to wait for that to be offered to me.
Yeah.
But no one, even the older Congolese men that I grew up with, none of them told me that they would willingly accept my handshake.
Yeah.
And so I didn't realize that in Congo that's disrespectful.
So next time you're going to wait for me, eh?
Sorry?
Next time you're going to wait for me.
But you're not Congolese, man.
No, so, I mean, there's some things we just accept.
Yeah.
We don't actually ask why are we doing what we are doing. And so, understand that culture is dynamic. Culture is, why is this thing so big? Don't end the show. There's this fluidity to culture, and as we develop, culture changes with us. And I asked by saying, why is it that you as parents have so much conflict with your parents, with your kids? Same household, same food, same language, but you are in conflict. And when they grow up, they might be African, but a very different African from your particular way of doing. Different colored or different Indian, because they are a lot more integrated than we were. And so the way they do life and the way they practice life might be very different from us. For example, I mean, I couldn't understand my daughter. We moved, she was 5.5 when we moved to Cape Town. Indians do things in a particular way. We don't do sleepovers, right? You know, we go visit, but there's no such thing as your child sleeping over at someone else's home. But you come here and she says, Dad, my friend is invited for a sleepover. I said, what's that? You know, almost a tension at that age already.
Yeah.
Because she's integrated into a particular worldview, a particular culture that's integrated with the Indianness and develops as what we call coconut generation. You know, we say white, black on the outside and white inside. And they develop a subculture within the culture. So within my home, she had her own personal culture, then you had the family culture. And those two were consistently in conflict, yes. Yeah. Because and only when I read a book published by my friend, Coconut Generation, the lights kind of clicked on for me. Now I understand why she behaves the way she behaves. Over the past, I mean, from almost 7 to 10, it was like, is this child Indian or what? Because I was forcing my particular worldview, and her worldview was evolving. All right? Mine was kind of static, but hers was evolving because so that we can actually effectively communicate the faith. Remember, this whole course is for one intent: understanding culture, more specifically the dynamicity of culture. We're able then to communicate the gospel effectively. I'm not too sure what's happening here. To understand again that we understand life through the cultural lens by which we look at we look through, and again culture is often developed by the objects we use, the gestures or the phrases. What are some of the phrases in Cape Town that is unique to the Cape Town culture or the Cape Town community?
Away.
J, yeah, you know?
Away.
Away, yeah. Well, away is not so much, but the J is definitely an add-on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What else?
Away massacre.
Away my?
Massacre.
Away my second.
Masakan, it's a
Oh,
mother's child.
Yeah.
It's like your mother's child.
Mother's child.
Yeah, or before you get robbed, they say, wat is die tyd? Then you know you're getting robbed.
True.
Right, and again, what are some of the objects that's unique to the African context? In the Xhosa, what would be some of the objects that would be only unique to the Xhosa context?
Like Soviet.
Sticks.
The sticks, right? Okay. The Zulus also carry sticks, but your sticks are much shorter. Right, okay? The Zulu sticks, the dungan, a clover, you finished. But the Xhosa stick is very short. The Zulu stick is very, very long.
What's the purpose for the stick?
Protection.
Is to hit
Yeah.
you with
So you use it to protect and to fight. Yeah. And so again, warfare, because you find with Shaka Zulu, you could stand from a distance and do warfare. With the Xhosa, if you engage your enemy close. So again, those objects tells us even our warfare is developed by the objects that we use. And so those phrases. What are some of the phrases? I mean, we spoke about. What were some of the unique phrases in your context?
In my context.
Yeah, in your culture. What was the unique phrase that you will only hear?
I'm not so sure about that. Because if I have to say it, then you will not understand.
No, explain. Just give us the phrase, the unique phrase, and then you can explain. No. There must be something unique that only your culture has.
That I don't know.
You don't know?
I'm not conversant with my culture.
There's a wonderful example, right? That the culture, again, you can be African, but you might not be conversant with your culture. So don't think that because I'm Indian, I might be conversant with Indian culture. For example, when someone sees me, I sit there, brother, you can put it down. When someone sees me from Durban and say, oh, do you know the person?
Yeah, that's a common thing.
What do you think is? I know every Indian education, because again the perspective. This Indian must know.
Yeah.
Everyone.
Well, just to
That's
add on
true.
to
That's what you do.
with regards to the tension that sometimes get raised with the involvement of culture. You find that even in the church we have a group of youngsters that wants to serve the Lord, but not in their particular way because they have got the involvement in their culture.
A different, yes,
The
some
type of
culture.
music that they use is completely different to the way that my parents and their parents used to do it. And so you have this tension between even the church and the church in one building because of the involvement of culture.
Absolutely. Eric, any comments? What would be unique to your Ugandan culture?
Yeah, it is Eric.
Pardon, I didn't make you well.
You're looking at me, you give me the impression that you are paying attention and now you're telling me you never heard what I said. I asked, what phrase in the Ugandan culture would be unique to your culture? What concept, what activity would be unique only to the Ugandan context that you won't find anywhere else?
I can't really tell because Uganda has very many tribes. Really be specific in knowing what is so common in other tribes.
Right. You muted. Okay, so I might ask, what is unique in your tribe that is different? What sets you apart from the other tribes? What phrases in your particular tribe or gestures or objects that you use in your particular tribe that might be unique only to your tribe? In comparison to...
In my tribe, it's the hospitality of the people.
So what you're saying that other tribes don't offer the same hospitality?
They have, but I think ours is much more.
It's much more pronounced
compared to the.
But what's that, eh? What is that?
That's his worldview.
Right, that my culture is more hospitable than, we call that ethnocentric. So be careful of that, Eric. When you become ethnocentric, that you feel that your culture is more superior, more better than the others. Again, because we understand that culture is the phrases people use, the objects, it's unique to them. It frames the way of doing life. And so it's important for us then to understand what are some of the symbols in the context of culture. Why do people use a particular thing? For example, what would be some of the symbolism? Okay, and this is, I think it's to a certain extent universal amongst the African context, Lobola, right? Or you might call it dowry. Okay, right through Africa, you will have a down payment, if I can use that term. What is the significance of that particular action?
For instance, in our culture, that particular action is the building the relationship between these two families.
You're building the relationship between
these
two families.
Yes.
Okay, you're not buying your wife.
You're not buying your wife,
yeah.
no.
It's not a male bride.
No. That is why you are not finishing payment, because you pay a certain amount.
Right.
But you are not expected to pay the entire amount that was pronounced.
Yeah, and sometimes the amount could be symbolic.
Yes.
Rather than actual payment. Yes. Because again, culture requires something. The activity would say, well, we're giving you my daughter, but there is some form of symbolic payment towards that. What would your culture, how would you explain Lobola or that phrase or term in your culture?
How would I explain it?
Yes. What term would you use? I mean, we know it's Lobola in Xhosa.
Honestly, I'm anti-culture.
So
I don't know.
What are you?
She's Western.
Yes, right price, but I don't know how to call it. Yes.
Right price. What's the name for it?
In my culture.
In your language.
That's what I don't know. In my language, I don't know. We know it as dowry or bride price.
But okay, yes. But there's no phrase.
No, there's no phrase.
What do you want
yeah, you're surprising me.
In my culture, Lobola is not called Lobola, it's called Chilamamlilo.
Okay, just explain.
Yeah, so Chilamamlilo, it's whereby when you come to pay Lobola, it's a very unique, it's from a Pemba side, that is Dr. Mlenga's tribe. So what they do, once you marry, the family comes together, and then from the tribe of the husband, they will cook every dish that is being cooked in that tribe. It can be 25 dishes.
Sure.
They will cook all those dishes. Right. But before you collect those dishes, there are women who come there, they hit a drum, and they dance. Okay. Now once those women they are on the ground, they don't stand up until you throw money. And this is not like 200 rand, no, you have to throw money.
Big money. Yes.
Because in you doing so, you are showing respect to the family, and you're also assuring them that I am capable of taking care of your daughter. And when you are bringing those dishes back, they can't come back empty.
I'm not buying your daughter, but I'm giving you evidence that I can take care of her. But someone from the Westerner, you don't understand the symbolism and the meaning behind that particular action. What to say? But these people are paying for their wives, right? Because they are from the outside.
Yeah.
Like we don't pay for our wives.
Yeah.
We pay for the rest of our lives.
We pay with our lives.
With our lives, yeah. Liren and then Rodney, what would be some of the unique concepts within the context in KZN?
So,
Yes.
go for it, Ross.
Okay, I think one of it would be the word ayo.
Ayo,
Ayo.
right, yeah. Ayo. So explain.
If somebody makes a statement, it can be anything shocking or something like that, and then we would just say ayo.
Yeah, but
or
you must phrase it. You must.
It can also be a.
I'm listening. Yeah.
Yeah, it could also be like a question. It's an exclamation. It can be used in different contexts.
Now, you Telugu speaking, right?
Yes.
But also in Iran, you Hindi.
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah, English speaking.
You're a bredo.
Yeah.
See that's a unique phrase. I'm a porridge, okay, which means that my ancestors used to love making
Porridge.
Porridge, right?
Oh, I guess.
And so when they refer to a Tamil in Durban, say you're a porridge guy, right? And so when they Hindi, they love making handmade bread, and we say you're a bredo. And Rodney, the Telugu speaking person.
I don't know.
You don't know.
I think we fall under porridge.
Under porridge, right? Because you kind of celebrate the same festivals as such, religious festivals.
Prof, while you three are talking, what is the and all in like all the signage? No. I'm saying because when I was in Durban, everything was like this and all and this and all. Like
you want to explain that, Rodney? Where we suffix and all.
Let's leave Niren to that.
Okay, Niren.
So I think the accent in Durban is unique. I think the guys know that we speak a lot quicker.
Faster? No.
Faster.
Let me rephrase that. We don't speak fast. They hear slow.
They hear slow. And when you're trying to be descriptive or giving an answer, it says, the way it was raining, hey, the trees and all were shaking.
Right.
Or the way the wind was blowing, it's like, hey, the roof tiles and all was falling.
You emphasize
so
it.
It's like a descriptive word per word for and all.
And I'm emphasizing that if I'm saying tiles and all, which means all the tiles or more than just the tiles were damaged. And so in Durban, and that's a unique phrase. You only hear it in
Durban.
In Durban, when someone talks and says, I had a bunny chow and all. It means that it's got lots of other stuff.
All the accompaniments.
Right.
But even cold drink, they say, give me some mineral, and you want a glass, they say, give me a tumbler. So
well, tumbler is a unique concept. Tumbler, it's glass. I mean, that word is used all over. Now we say we become Eurocentric rapper. Glass.
So you can say garden.
It's important to understand these particular meanings and phrases, and again, beauty of culture. That's what we need to understand. When you communicate the gospel, understand you communicate to a person who lives in a particular experience, and it is our responsibility to recognize those symbolisms, to recognize those phrases, to recognize those practices, so that we can connect with people. When Jesus takes himself the form of a man and coming and dwelling amongst us. Now, God could have created Jesus like another Adam, right, in our Christology class.
Yeah.
But he chose not to. He could have created Jesus as an angel, but he chose not to, but allowed Jesus to be born miraculously so that he could identify with us. So Jesus sets for us this beautiful example of how when we communicate, we got to make sure we understand the language, the phrases, the customs, and the culture of people, so that our communication is effective. Can you imagine if Jesus came as a spirit only and says God loves you? It would be very difficult to comprehend. Now that he walked, he was lived with us, tempted yet without sin, we understand his humanity. Because we understand his humanity, there is a sense of relationship that we have with Christ. And that's unique. And so again, when we be a lot more intentional in understanding the culture in which we communicate the gospel, dialogue becomes a lot more meaningful. All right, and culture then must be respected. And the reason why it must be respected is because we understand that cultures are diverse. When I use the phrase of Eric that my culture is more hospitable, then I'm always saying that my culture is better than yours. Well, Indian culture is best, I think. Okay, but it's important that I cannot overstate the importance of respecting culture. Now, when the missionaries of the past came and communicated the gospel to us, they said, Africans are not organized. They are savages. They can't read. They can't write. They have no sense of commerce. But yet they never took time to understand the African ways of doing life. And yet the African had a sophisticated economic system. We never paid in money. We bartered. Yes. We never owned title deeds of land. The land belonged to everyone. And so when young fellow came and said, maybe I went to the court and says, show me your title deed. And the fellow says, what title deed are you talking about? He said, because you don't have a title deed, this is not your land, let me take it.
Didn't the land belong to the chief?
The land belonged to everyone. The chief was a custodian of the land. Yeah, he never owned the land. He was there just to make sure that everyone has his particular share. But the colonizers, should I say, the settlers gave the chief that kind of power. So what was a good thing over a period of time was infused by another culture, and we'll talk about that, the negative and positive, then power came into play. And where the chief never saw himself as a custodian of the people, but someone in power over the people. Because he learned that from the industrialist.
Prof, I have another example of that dynamic happening. It's like when cash money came into the system of lobola. I have a friend who was explaining to me her particular tribe's form of lobola, and it was similar to Brother Martin's culture, where the family is not allowed to give everything in full.
Right.
That's the one thing. If you give the price in full, it's disrespectful. You're saying it's nothing, So the culture was that you have to come back every single year with another piece of that, and it was in the form of livestock. And the offspring of that livestock, the first offspring of the livestock, goes back to the original family.
Right.
And so the system was meant to build the relationships between the companies.
And it's a beautiful thing, right?
Yeah, the families. But with cash, a lot of those things changed, and it's become in a lot of places a money
commercialized,
a money making thing. For one thing, cash can't produce offspring,
Yes.
and so animals won't, for example, be returned to the original families. People try to pay it off instead of coming back every year and building that relationship through those celebrations.
And that is what we're saying. Culture is dynamic.
Yeah.
It's evolving. Because what was a good thing became now something negative. In the context of India, very similar. The dowry, maybe Rodney and Niren can share. In the context of India, and to a certain extent we practice that in South Africa, but amongst Indians, but in a very kind of, in India, it is the girl party who pays the the girl who pays the guy, because the girl's family, because they want to make sure that he has enough resource to take care of the girl.
I like that. I like that culture.
Yeah.
That's a quiet culture.
So when I was in India, I'm busy doing this wedding, and next morning I see this bringing the wardrobes and pots and pans. Because the girl's parents and her family say, well, we're sending you off. You must understand, we're sending you off with my daughter. We are prepared to live. So it's not about buying, but it's about making sure that you have enough to take care of my daughter.
Is it in terms of cash price or in terms of like
people bring in kind.
Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes it's cash, whatever you can bring.
Okay.
And so I'm performing the ceremony. Next month I'm saying there's all this bustle that's happening there. Quite. In the context of South Africa, the ceremony is quite reserved as such. And here you find all this bustling, people are moving stuff, making space, and I'm trying to officiate at this wedding. And I thought that's very disrespectful. You know, I'm trying to preach to them, and, you know, but these people are messing up. But again, not my culture, not my tradition. That's acceptable. That while the wedding is carrying on, there is movements, families are coming in, bringing stuff, and that stuff that is given is then for the benefit of the family as they become husband. However, like I said, there's negative and there's positive, and we'll talk about that. The negative of that is that over a period of time that changed. So that, and again, the price then was set based on how fair the guy is, how educated he is, how well traveled he is. So if he's dark like me, the bride price will be very low. Okay? But if he's fair, you have a separate bride price. Bride price, you have to pay dowry. If you have a degree, a separate level. If the person has experience, it's a different level. And if he's got international experience, it's even more. So you got levels of this person. Now, what was a good thing? Again, people started, the negative side, power, right? Power infused it, and so people said, how can we make money out of this? And people will pay that because they want the son or the daughter to get married to someone who is educated, someone who is well-traveled, someone who is rich. And so your status in society then depends on the price you pay for your dowry. What was meant to be a good thing became commercialized and a sinful thing.
It's similar in the African circles, because if a girl has a degree, apparently like duplicates.
That doubles. Yeah. So I mean, something that was good is now the negative of. So there's a positive and there's negative of culture. We need to be aware of that. Understand what was the meaning of this, and I'll try to understand the meaning and see where it is.
In my culture, if the girl is a virgin.
Sorry.
If in my culture, if she's a
virgin, bride price
no, it's 10 times higher. You pay more.
Yeah, well, that's why you have all of these so-called schools in the KZN, because that's the same thing in KZN. You know, to test that the girls are, whether they can actually do that, I'm not too sure. You know, because children are very active these days. And that's not a very scientific test. I spoke about the Indian context. Our colored brothers and sisters are remaining silent. No one buys you. So
we don't have a specific culture. We are mixed.
No, there is a culture.
There is a culture. Maybe just don't. You have not really.
Yeah.
There's the way we do. There are certain phrases we use. There's certain things we do. There's certain objects we use that are unique to our context. So you ask, what is unique to my context that you won't ever find anywhere else? What would be one of the unique foods in that is unique to
Gatsby's?
No, that's a. Gatsby is kind of a copy of a bunny.
No, it's not a copy of a bunny chow. Bunny chow is a colored thing.
I know, but you're trying to copy the bunny. You couldn't manufacture, so Gatsby came in. And then even tried to make it spicy, called masala Gatsby. And that's unique too. To Cape, that's a particular dish. Not boboti. The particular way in which the Cape Townians make it unique to Cape Town. And so it's important to understand that we don't have stereotypes. Our stereotype, and wonderful, our stereotype is what? You in Africa, you should think like an African, but she's not. She from the DRC, from Burundi, Cameroon, don't speak French.
I'm from the English.
There we go.
So she's an American African.
Yeah, you
No, she's backwards. She's backwards.
Again, see, I mean, our stereotype was that she ought to know
culture.
But not everyone in that particular.
So is she uncultured?
I'm not uncultured.
No, she's hybrid.
Is it by choice or is it?
So tell me, Nikita, what would be your bride price?
My what?
Your bride price.
Isn't it 18 rand now?
Why?
That's a bread.
So what must the guy do in order to win favor?
Everything, PhD in theology.
There are certain things, even in the context.
According to our family.
No,
According to the family, because the family is part of that's learned.
culture.
Yeah. What would be some of the things you'll expect?
He
if
needs
you-
to.
I know
Right.
culture.
He needs to be educated. He needs
Right.
to have a certain tax bracket.
Right.
He needs to
Sure.
be emotionally intelligent.
Right.
That's according to my family. That's according to me. My brother's was.
There is a standard,
Yeah.
right? And that standard just never, at the flick of a switch, came. They were learned. This is what you expect. If you want to bring someone, these are the criteria. He or she meets.
I remember when my dad used to tell us stories, he used to say that if at his age, I mean when he was my age, in fact when he was a bit younger than me, he said that when he used to, if guys used to impregnate a girl,
Yeah.
when they had to get, they were actually forced to get married.
The forced to get married, yes.
Forced to get married.
Yeah, because you took
Yeah, it's definitely in our
responsibility
culture.
of that, yeah. Not anymore, now you just leave the, now you just leave the girl, because, right, exactly, you go to your parents' house, and maybe the parents would prefer that, because no, this guy is just a bum. I'm serious, unemployed, so I'd rather take care of my own
Another
daughter.
thing that the colored people do is a lot of them stay with their parents until they're older, and they also hand their salary off.
That's stereotype.
That's like
No, that's stereotype.
no, I mean they do that.
That's amongst the Indians.
Yeah, that's stereotype.
But that was my father's generation.
Yeah.
So prior to my father getting married, Naren, I'm not too sure about you or Rodney, my father would give, when he was single, would have taken his money and given to his mother. And when he got married, he would take his money and give to
Wife.
his wife. All right? We don't do it now. I don't need to share my money.
No, you don't.
Naren?
You know, a
Rob,
couple
you
of
know
things
what?
that
You
they
know
do.
what's so unique
It's not a
about
stereotype.
African
It's a
Indians?
generalization.
They have their mother. When they work, they give the money to the mother.
Yeah.
Then they get married.
Yes.
Right? They get married. But when they get married, sometimes they fall in love, fall out of love. They get a girlfriend. But you know who's the only person in their life that they give their money to? It's their mother.
The mother. Yeah.
An Indian loves his mom more than a lot of things, but that's a generational.
Hey, don't give the Indian secret away, man.
It's changing.
Yeah, and
Even
that's
with the dowry that you spoke about, we still have it here where it's more of an embarrassment.
Yeah.
If the girl's family are poor, irrespective of whether she got a degree or not, but if the girl's family is poor and the boys are rich, then there's a specific way that she's treated. So even if she is educated, she still has cultural duties to deal with, like her mother-in-law, go on.
Yeah, mother-in-law. But what's very interesting, I mean, for me it was a culture shock when I came to Cape Town. And lecturing my first year, one of our students, Gareth Friend, married a doctor. That would have never happened in the Indian context, where a doctor would marry a pastor.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. These are good
It
combination.
will never happen. Yeah, it will never happen. I came to with another one. For me, it was a cultural shock.
Yeah.
Literally because I would never experience in my lifetime marrying a doctor. Well, let me start that. And the reason for that is I was dating a chemical engineer when I was bivocational, and as long as I was earning the salary, that's fine. And the moment I told this girlfriend that I had, and she had an MBA plus BSc chemical engineering plus an MBA. The moment I told her I'm entering the ministry, she says, "What? I can't take care of you." Yeah.
So it's not about affection, it's about pain. What was that?
Well, it's about taking care. She realized that the pastor
It's gonna suffer.
is going to suffer. And she in fact, her words to me was, "I want to travel the world."
Okay.
I think she regrets the fact that she never married me because I travel the world more than her. Don't have picture. Hey, delete it. No, but that's a reality, right?
Yeah.
And so it was a culture shock to me
Yeah.
when I came to realize, a doctor is marrying a
Pastor.
Is she crazy or what? It won't happen.
Yeah.
In Durban, for example. Again, perceptions, right?
Yeah.
Perception. So it's important for us to understand that we've got to respect other person's culture, and we just don't tolerate them. We often say not on tolerating the guy. We don't tolerate, but we engage.
So where does love come in?
Where does?
Where does the concept of loving somebody irrespective of or irregardless of where the person has or not, where does that fall in? Is it just about
Comes from Jesus.
No. So no, again, Naren, did you have arranged marriage? Naren, was your marriage arranged?
No, love marriage.
Love marriage, okay. So in the Indian context, you have love marriage and you have arranged marriage. But even your love marriage is arranged, in the sense that while for example, I fell in love with Patricia, but before I could ask a hand in marriage, I had to tell my parents. And my parents will ask Patricia's parents whether my son can marry. And once Patricia's dad and mom says yes, that's the only time we can formally date. However, in India it is different. So the both couples might not even know each other. They will arrange the marriage. Families, okay, you a particular social bracket, for educational bracket, we come together. The difference between the arranged marriage is proven that when you grow to love someone, your marriage lasts. Because the reality is that sometimes you fall in love and you can fall out of love. So in the Indian context, you marry the person for who he is. You see what you get. You don't know the person from a bar of soap, and you marry him, and then you grow to love him. And because of that, India has the lowest divorce rates in the world. Well, there's also stigma to divorce, so that contributes. But generally, it is proven that arranged marriages tend to be long-lasting, and love is then developed because you're not falling in love, you grow into love. Difference.
Yes, Prof. I that makes sense to me, because even if you look at the Bible, there's a certain level of choice that comes with love.
Right.
That love should be something one chooses, not something one just spontaneously experiences.
Yeah.
And so if your culture is that you don't choose who you marry, but you have to love them anyways,
Very
that
biblical,
means
actually.
your love to them is something you choose and actively do,
Right.
and not something that, because she's attractive or because
Right.
of whatever.
Yeah.
It's not something based on something
You see.
So it's something you choose,
Right.
which
And
makes
that-
sense to me.
It makes sense to a lot of Indians. But again, that good thing becomes something negative.
But the choice is made for them, right?
Yeah, the choice is made for them, but the person can accept or decline. Although the girl can say, you know what, the guy is too dark, I don't want him.
Sure.
So the choice is still left to the individual, but the families will be intentional in making that alliance. In fact, they will go to the level of actually employing a ranger, an alliance, marriage alliance person, to bring both of those.
Yeah.
I mean, they look at that.
Like a matchmaker.
Right, exactly, a matchmaker.
Yeah, there is an Indian matchmaker show.
A show, yeah. Watch that, and you'll understand again how persons engage in India. But again, that's not a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
But when Westerners sees that something bad.
Yeah.
But yet, when you look at the stats, marriage is strong in India than it's in the West.
It is,
And sometimes only divorce is something relatively new in the African context.
Yeah.
Right? It was not something.
Would you agree that the reason the West sees that as a bad thing is because they have a higher value for feelings, like your emotions and like you feel is more important in the West, and so you choose based on your feelings. Like this whole thing of your gut feeling and
it's individualism.
Follow your heart and all that.
It's individualism.
Okay.
We kind of come from the peasant context, so relationships are a lot more important. So keeping my family happy with the girl I marry is absolutely important, because in the context of in the Asian context, you're just not marrying the girl, you're marrying the family, right? I'm sure also in the African context, in the Western context, I've got nothing to do with the family, because it's just an individual decision. So I love the person, I don't have to love the family. Okay, so you can have a person married but never visit his in-laws for years on it, because they don't really matter, because it's really an individualistic society very much.
Like Prof, I think in our culture during the olden days there was a practice that we call twala.
Twala, explain.
Yes. And that practice, it was not a choice of a lady to choose whom should he marry. There would be an arranged kidnapping of a girl.
Okay. Don't all. Listen to what he's saying.
So the girl will be arranged with the older people, then they will, for instance, the family of the girl will be informed at other stage, and they can send the girl away, or maybe to go and fetch water in the water.
Right.
So that they can be an opportunity for the kidnappers to come and
take. Yes, but would the girl be made aware of it?
No.
No, okay.
So the family knows only.
The family knows about it, but the girl.
So it's a report.
But that is negative. That is negative connotations, though.
Again, we got to understand the meaning.
Yeah.
No, okay, but think of it. So sorry.
Yes, but if you check the statistics, we grew up from that kind of background.
Culture.
All the people, they always used to do that, and they will develop love in the process.
In the process, they grow
They grow together up until they go separate way by maybe someone.
So in the Western context, what will that be considered?
Crime.
What particular name will have for it?
Human
trafficking. Yeah. All right. Because
but you see the difference.
And it's not human trafficking.
But the difference is
accepted.
The difference is the family knows about it.
The family knows about it.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
But you just don't know who's going to kidnap.
Yeah.
So think of it. Think of Abraham.
Yeah.
Sending his servant. Right? He says, go to my hometown, choose a girl from my particular tribe. And what's the first thing the servant does?
He says the first one that comes out.
Right?
Which is that to be the right.
And what's the second thing they do?
Oh, he gave them gifts.
Gave them
Gifts, yeah.
gifts, right? So the price was paid. You know, and then you find this beautiful illustration. I mean, it was Rebecca, I think it was, who didn't even know Isaac, and then goes with the servant and not falls in love, grows to love. Again, very biblical, right? So, but from the West, we'll say that is how can the family just send her away? It would not make sense to the Western mind, like the way certain activities in Africa or outside of the West doesn't make sense to the Western mind. And when something does not make sense to you, doesn't mean to say that culture is less developed than mine. When something does not make sense to me, it means that I have a
bias.
Not a bias, but a distorted view or a pathological view. Or my understanding of the context or my understanding of the symbolism is limited. But too often, because of our limited understanding, I use my lens and say, well, that practice is wrong because it doesn't reflect my particular view. And so it's important to understand that the way we engage in culture, it's important. That's why the ethnographic study is very, very important. Intentionally immersing yourself in the culture, but also adapting to it. The West, because again, the missionaries came to, I'm using this particular, I think it's all over Africa, you could see it. Missionaries came, they never immersed, they never adapted, right? It was almost a superficial form of adaptation. What didn't they immerse in, or rather, what were some of the issues in South Africa that never allowed for the missionaries to adapt? Apartheid. And what was the law? If you're white, you can't live with a person of color. And so the missionaries lived with the whites, and they came and did work, and they went back and lived with actually understanding culture. And the only way you understand someone's culture is if you watch them and live and you watch them do life. You can't stand from a distance and criticize. You can't stand from a distance and make kind of
Thank you.
objective constructions about that particular reality. You got to be part, got to participate in the cultural event. What are some of the unique cultural events that you have in the Xhosa tradition?
Like indeed,
What's that?
the celebration of the boy when he's coming from the mountain.
The mountains, right? It's a unique celebration, right? How many of us attended that?
What more?
Hey? How many of us were not Xhosa? I mean, I myself have not.
My friend.
Right? Although I was invited to a reed dance, which I went to. You know, I thought this is not nice watching young girls be rested dance in front of the
Did
king.
they dance like that?
Yes. Yeah, because then the king can choose. You know, but again, accept the cultural norm doesn't mean to say, because I don't understand it is wrong. It might be wrong for me or not wrong for the person in the particular culture, but also a particular power notion at play. The king can choose, therefore I need to go and show off myself. So yeah, just coming back to that. The practice. I asked how many of us actually went and watched and celebrated the event.
So what on TV?
None of us. And yet we're a minister to Xhosa people. Right? We want to present the gospel without understanding who we're presenting it to. So the right thing to do is that before we present the gospel, is to understand the context, culture, but not from a distance, but immerse yourself in that particular context. And again, that's incarnational ministry. Jesus did that. He took upon himself the form of a man and dwelt amongst us.
Yeah, in terms of my own cultural context, personally, from my
You have one.
knowledge, I don't know a lot. There are a lot, but I don't know a lot. But I know some specific ones.
Okay.
Like in terms that we have a yearly annual festival.
Right.
That one is compulsory, wherein even those who are out of the country, everywhere they come back to the village, like on yearly basis. They come, they organize a dance, they cook the staple food, and they eat, and there are all kind of dances they invoke. They call it the masquerades, the dance to celebrate and to appease the gods.
Okay.
So that is done on a yearly basis, and it makes it brings back the culture and
Culture, like yes. Okay, and we spoke of the diversity of culture, and this is the beauty of it. We must acknowledge that. I might not understand it, but there's something beautiful that is taking place. My responsibility in communicating the gospel in that context is to understand that particular event, and the only way I can do it is by immersing and adapting to that particular context. And we understand that context, every culture has something valuable to contribute. And when we understand that, I think our human experience will be better. And then I'm not, as the president of the gospel, saying, well, I've got a better worldview than you, and therefore you listen to me because I am in power. Any questions before we move on?
So, Prof, what would you say is an appropriate reaction to something that seems wrong in your own culture? That is, I'll give you an example. A few weeks ago, I was at Cape Town station, and these girls and these those drummers and stuff, they're doing their dances and stuff, and the girls were like bare-chested. Obviously, in my mind, I'm like, okay, that's their culture, etc. But at the same time, is that okay in the public space?
Very, very important. Who said it was not okay in the public space?
Naomi.
No. Who said being bare-breasted was indecent?
I thought the Bible says you shouldn't be naked.
The Bible says,
Bible
clothes
you must be dressed modestly.
Yeah, remember clothing came after the fall.
Yeah.
It wasn't prior to the fall.
Yeah. But my question is more, what is the right or the more appropriate reaction? Not so much questioning.
And that's difficult. I'll tell you
How
what.
will you react towards that as a preacher?
I will react with a sense of, why is this person not covering up because of my particular worldview? Then when you go into public, You are covered up. However, we must understand that had I grown up in a context where there was not apartheid, in KZN, Zulu women will go into the city, I wouldn't say half naked, bare, without clothes. And then the then government of KZN said, if you're coming into the city, you must cover up. And that became legal. And if you did not cover up, you were, you're charged for indecency. If that particular rule was not put into place, I'm just saying, maybe our worldview would have been different, because we've been conditioned to think about decency from a perspective of covering up. Now, what would be important, what would be good to go and ask a Zulu woman, so why do you not cover up? What's the purpose of being bare-breasted? You're finding out. You're not judging, you are finding out. Narman, do you know why? Yeah, because that's unique only to the Zulu context, right? It's not, and maybe, I know at least my understanding is unique to the Zulu context. But I always thought that it's offensive because of my particular worldview. Again, projecting my biases onto that particular person, not understanding why they're doing what they are doing. So I trust I answered your question.
Still in line with what Navy was asking. For example, like what I just explained in terms of my culture, when they do all this masquerading and stuff like that, we know it's not biblical and it's like against God. So now, how are you able to penetrate that and debunk that with the gospel? How are you able to do that?
So we'll come to that in positive and the negative. Niren, Eric, and Rodney, any engagements and any comments?
I just wanted to find out, how do we draw the line between culture and religious practices? Because I'll just relate something that happened to you.
We will come to that.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
We will come to that in terms of worldviews, right? That I can be in a particular culture that has a particular context, but I might have a different worldview with regards to how I live in that culture. My worldview is shaped by my faith. Okay, that is integrated into my context, and therefore the Christian scripture shapes my worldview as an Indian in terms of how I live in that particular context. But I don't go around saying to all the other Indians, you are savages because you're worshipping multiple gods, or you're savages because you are still sacrificing to animals to an idol. I don't do that, because my intention is not to look down upon, but to see, as I understand, how do I communicate the gospel effectively. Yes, Sheikh.
So just an observation from Jesus' ministry. With the Samaritan woman again, they asked him to stay there for 2 days, and he did. He stayed within that culture, within that community for 2 days. So he himself immersed himself in the culture that wasn't really his. So,
absolutely. And remember, he went beyond the culture. But he transformed it. Remember, the person who came to him was transformed. She went and said, "See, I've listened to a man, and he told me more than just what he knew, and he opened up my life." And she went and proclaimed Jesus to the rest of the community. However, we must understand there are positive and negatives of culture. There are certain symbolisms that are good and that are valuable. However, there are certain negatives, and whenever and more so, because again we are sinful people, right? We are tainted with sin, and even though something good is found in culture, we have a tendency of making it evil, and so we need to understand what is the negative and what is the positive, and then as we engage the gospel and as we communicate the gospel, because we understand the symbolisms and because we understand the context. We can use the symbolism, we can use the languages, like Paul did. Your own philosopher said, we live, we have our being in him. And so using words and phrases and concepts that they understand, you can then communicate the gospel effectively. For example, when I was in Durban and I was doing a funeral service. Now this older gentleman, he came to faith very late in his life, and most of his family members, and more especially his brothers, were Hindus. And when I say they were religiously practicing Hindus, two of his brothers were Swamis, which means, and one of his brothers went to Sri Lanka and studied the Sanskrits. And so when he was kind of one of the religious knowledgeable priest, that the way of doing was not transmitted by tradition but through proper study of the Hindu text. And so knowing that it's going to be 99% Hindus, I couldn't approach my sermon from the biblical text. Because very few of them would have, one carried it, very few of them would have understood what I would say. So how do I communicate the gospel at this funeral service, knowing there's 90% Hindus, and maybe 99% Hindus, and just the father, the older gentleman, and his son and his daughters were believers. Out of the 200 people, there may be maximum 10 were believers. And they were kind enough to say, no, my brother was a believer, a follower of Jesus Christ. It's only fair that we have a Christian funeral for him. But how do I communicate the gospel to an audience that is predominantly Hindu? Which means that I then have to go and study what do they believe about salvation before I speak about salvation. What do I understand? What is their understanding, firstly, of salvation? And so I can't go and say, this brother, now it's going to be the glorious presence of God in heaven. For them, that will make no sense. Because in the Hindu mindset, there's no such thing as heaven until you're born a million times. You move from reincarnation, cyclic states of reincarnation, and you've got to have a million births and rebirths until you get to moksha, or salvation. And that is kind of a state, not in fellowship with God. It's a state of enlightenment. And so when you speak about being in the glorious presence of Jesus, it will make no sense. That when you die in the presence of Christ, because again, it goes against their culture and their theological worldview. And so I thought, well, the best is then to approach my sermon from the Hindu text. And I entitled it, "The Lamb Who Takes Away Your Sins." But I never used John. I went to the Rig Veda chapter 9. And I articulated a narrative from the Rig Vedas. And so the story goes like this. There was this yogi, which means a kind of a spiritual man. And he looked around and he saw people sinning. And every day they were sinning more. The sin became a lot more grievous. And he spoke to Brahma and he sought wisdom and said, please, there must be something to stop humanity from sinning at the level they do. And so he had a vision of a blood. And so in lots of Hindu tradition, the first offering would be the blood of chicken, of fowl, right? And so he said, maybe if I slaughter a fowl or a chicken and offer it to the gods, they will be appeased, and therefore the humanity humanity's sinfulness will be eradicated. A few years later down the line, evaluating, same thing. In fact, the sinfulness of man increased, and said maybe more blood needs to be offered. And he offered the blood of ox and bulls. And again, after that, still there was no change in his particular context. And then he had a vision. And this is written down in the Rig Vedas chapter 9. And the Rig Vedas is kind of the doctrine. If you understand the Rig Vedas, you understand Hinduism. Not in terms of the folklore, but in its theology. And in Rig Veda chapter 9 says, there is a lamb that has a crown of thorn upon its head. This lamb will be tied to a tree. And this lamb will die. And the blood of the lamb will serve as remission for the sins of people. Having died, this lamb will rise again. Now, before Moses wrote Genesis, the Rig Vedas were 2,000 years before. God, in His grace and His mercy, revealed something of His character in the Rig Vedas. And so it was my responsibility, in order to present the gospel, is to start from where the person is and what they understand. And every time I said something, I said, Swami, because you address him as God, Swami, please correct me if my understanding of the Rig Vedas are inconsistent with yours. And I told this particular, I interrupted my son, I said, even before Jesus revealed Himself to the Christians, He revealed Himself to the Hindus in the Rig Vedas. The same Jesus that takes away the lamb, the sins of the world, is the same Jesus this yogi saw 2,000 years before the first Old Testament book was written. And so, they were, you know, are you telling me there is something of the redemptive act of God in the Rig Vedas? You see again, because the Rig Vedas, you must be twice born. You must be enlightened to read the Rig Vedas. So the ordinary Hindu will not. You read the Bhagavad Gita, which is kind of folklore, but the Rig Veda is theology. And so when you explain the Hindu scriptures from, or the concept of salvation from the Hindu scriptures and show how they relate to Jesus Christ, the opportunity for communication was a lot more easier, because you took time to understand what they believe about salvation. So before you communicate the gospel, and that's why it's not a hit and run stuff, right? You immerse yourself, you understand the context, you understand the culture, so that when you present the gospel, it is meaningful. And you find Paul did that, even Jesus. Your ministry becomes incarnational. Right, and again, part of the negative, again, the positive is that, you know, we see certain influences, certain products of culture that impacts our environment, certain traditions, certain social practices that are good. Ubuntu is a good thing, but it's not good when Ubuntu is privatized. When you don't see everyone as the brother in Christ. The Ubuntu is only for my clan, and everyone who's not my clan must be center way. Something that's positive, Ubuntu, communal, but can become negative when it's applied narrowly. Because again, sin and the desire for power. And the reality is that there is always this notion that wherever there's sin, there's always a struggle for control, there's always a struggle for power. And as you adapt, as you communicate the gospel, then you will actually show how the gospel transforms that particular practice. How the gospel deals with power in our culture. The sad reality, during apartheid, we never used that. I mean, we allow the gospel to manifest the negative side of Christianity, where we suppressed someone who did not look like me, using scripture to say, well, because you don't look like me, you're a Canaanite, you're from the line of Ham, and therefore I'm the elect, and therefore I need to, I'm more superior than you, I'm better than you, and therefore I need to colonize you, and therefore communicate the gospel to you because you're a savage, I am an industrialist. You're a peasant, I am the one who knows better. Again, these are some of the negative things in the context of culture that we must be aware of. And again, there was a negative and positive. Why did I go to that? Oh yes. And so it then must cause us to examine our own cultural practices. Why do we do what we do? Looking at culture through a critical lens. I'm doing this because the reality is that some of our practices we don't actually question. We just do it. Right? How many of us, I don't question, okay, I'm Indian, why am I eating curry 3 times a week? I just eat it. I don't question whether it's healthy or not. You know? What are some of the practices that you just do because you grew up in that, without having a critical perspective? What are some aspects of your culture that has this power imbalance, where one person wants to dominate the other? And again, there are certain aspects of the culture that leads to that particular context, and especially if you come from a class system like India, where one class is more higher than the other. But again, in South Africa, we might not be divided in races now, but we divided in classes. One class is better, so you get a group of rich white Indians and Africans telling the rest of the world how to live. In America, it's Elon Musk and Trump, but in South Africa, you have that particular bourgeois class that controls and wants to dictate to the rest of the community outside. That's a bad thing of cultural practices, and we've got to be aware of the positive and the negative perspectives of culture. There's something beautiful in the cultural festivities, there's celebrations, heritage that ought to be celebrated. However, when there's discrimination, when there's inequality, we need to critically examine our culture and ask, what are they perpetuating? What are they doing with the other? Is our culture othering others? Always ask yourself that question. And I think in South Africa, we kind of, many times, other others because we don't look the same, or maybe apartheid taught us to look at people differently. All right, any other questions before we, about 5 minutes more. I just want to say before I close, the notes are there, I'm not going to go into this many more. I just want to define culture. Culture, again, I didn't make mention, is multifaceted. It encompasses beliefs, values, customs, and practices. And craft, using Crocken's definition, says culture is a total way of life of a people, the social legacy the individual acquires from his or her group, a people designed for living. If you understand culture, what is the path we follow for living without even questioning it? Right? Why do I behave in a particular way without even questioning why I do what I do? And then if we kind of understand what culture is, culture that is a coping mechanism. It allows for strategy and survival. Birds of a feather? Yeah, you ask yourself, why? I often say, sure, look at all the blacks and Indians. Why do they congregate? Why don't they mix? That's my first criticism, not realizing that's a coping mechanism. That I'm different and I want to go to persons that are kind of same. And you get one individual who might go and mingle. So it's a coping mechanism. And when people practice their cultural customs, it is a survival. It's a mechanism for survival. Also, to say that they belong to this particular social construct. Culture shows belonging. Right? Otherwise, you are an outsider, and no one wants to be considered an outsider. Cultures are systems expressed, ideas that build upon one another. We said culture is complex. It's just not just kind of, I understand this. It's a complex set of ideas that come together. And these ideas that come together enable us to develop what we call habitual behavior. I watch my parents eating with their hands, and I've asked, we got spoons, why am I still using my hands? I was given to understand the food tastes better, and it does. But I don't question it. I just do because of the practices and the patterns that become habitual. And then culture is learned. We must understand this. Culture is not developed from the environment you live. It is something that you watch people do. It is passed on from generation to generation. You take me and put me. If I was a 2-year-old, if you took me and put me in Uganda with Eric, I would speak. Eric, what language do you speak in Uganda apart from English? And your tribe?
Lugbarati.
Right. What is it? Lugbarati. I would speak that particular language because culture is.
That's the local language you speak there.
Right. And if you put me there as a little child, I grow up and I will look different, but I will adapt and I will learn from those cultural experiences. So we learn from our parents, and so that's why I say racism is taught. Othering people is actually taught. children don't come and say, you're different, I don't like you. They watch you treat others. They hear your conversations. They say, my dad or mom is othering. They go to school and they practice the same. No one develops in a vacuum. And so, culture comes to the worldview, the underlying perspective. What's the underlying perspective? What was the underlying perspective of apartheid? Whites are better, persons of color are lower, inferior, and therefore we need to. The whole process of colonization as well. Europeans were brighter, we need to colonize and educate the savages in Africa, and often referred to as what? Africa was the dark continent. You know, how terms are phrased to show one is more superior than the other. And Livingstone's come and brings the light. You know, like there was the Jesus was the only Livingstone came in at that particular time. So it's very important. Again, we said that culture produces, there are non-material stuff, there's customs and rites which are non-material, and there are material stuff that comes out from a culture, artifacts, clothing. Kenya is, not Kenya, Nigeria is a tapestry of many tribes. And then you'll be able to identify a person by the clothing he wears. That this person is Nigerian, but he belongs to that particular tribe. Even by the way his hat is folded.
So you're discussing, anthropology and how to communicate the gospel to other people, right? To others who have their own cultural structures and their own backgrounds, etc., and their own perspective and their own mindset and habitual behavior. At what point do we start to dissect this in terms of how we communicate the gospel to ourselves?
To yourself, use the same methodology. What are some of the we call it mind mapping. We must spoke about mind mapping. What are some of the biases that I have that we perceive that our culture is better and therefore doesn't need transformation? Why is it that it must be a white man communicating the gospel to a black man? Did you ever ask yourself the question? I mean, what Moses said, when a Westerner comes and preaches, everyone raises their hands. And when a Zambian preaches, they don't raise their hands. We ask ourselves why? What led to that particular cultural practice? There's an underlying factors. There are the white man, he's probably more educated, so I need to listen to him. Okay? And it's important to understand it. These notes will put up. Again, we must understand there are different levels in culture. You got, if I studify culture, you got your personal culture, then you got your family culture, then you got your community culture, your subculture, then you got your nation culture. You know, where you are. Are you Indian, colored, African, non-South African? And then you have your national culture, South African. And then you have what we call your continental culture. Are you Asian? Are you African? Are you European? All of these are different certifications of culture. And there's sometimes within each of these particular strands a unique thing. And that's what Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except me. Because in that, Jesus encapsulates all of the worldviews. And I said worldviews are assumptions of culture. It's a pattern that directs our culture. Personal culture, family culture, communal culture, regional culture, national culture, multinational culture. We spoke about Eric saying, my tribe. I mean, he's in Uganda, but you've got multiple tribes. And let's face it, even in the context of the colored context, what are some of the separating things that we all are colored, but what are some of the stratifications? Colors were dark, colors were fair. Right? That's a reality. Colors were straight hair, colors who?
Crusade.
Okay.
The fairway colors and the purple colors.
Sorry?
The fairway colors and the purple colors.
Right. Fair, okay, you actually got it. Okay. No, that's important to understand that even there's subcultures.
Subcultures.
That I am a a particular, and if I've got more white DNA,
Yeah.
then I'm, people, you'll hear culture, my ancestry is from the French.
Yeah.
But you'll never hear of the Germans. But you'll never hear my ancestry from the Khoisan.
Yeah.
Why? No, why?
That's
Or even better, my ancestry is actually from the Indians. You know that? Eh? That there's more Indian DNA in the color makeup than Khoisan and other, because Houghton actually theorized that many years ago, but they don't accept it as a theory because it meant they had to rewrite history all over again. And so it's important. When we come, I'm glad that you, I trust through my storytelling you're getting concepts as to why we need to engage culture differently. And again, there's different aspects. There's traditional culture, there's peasant culture, there's industrial culture. Industrial culture is Western. They're the best. We're going to tell you what to do. And then again, there's economic culture, there's religious culture. So you can be in a particular strand, but a particular worldview dominates our culture. Christians all over the world understand that the love that we have for Christ, and Christ loves us, and there's something unique about Christians come together. There's something unique about Muslims come together. Muslims will bomb, and this is it. Do you know why a Muslim will bomb you? Or rather, will place a bomb around him and walk into a grouping of men and women and just blow himself up?
Because it's guaranteed
to go to heaven.
Salvation.
It's a cultural worldview, religious worldview. Because I mean, all of your namaz, all of your hajj, all of your works suppresses you, and this is the only thing that gives you direct access to heaven. Blow yourself up.
I mean, it's not wrong. It's not wrong though, because you're gonna meet your maker immediately.
Muhammad did not know that. I also just remember that, right?
Yeah.
He didn't know whether to meet his maker.
Yeah,
but that's the only plausible certainty. I'm saying plausible certainty that you have direct access to what's heaven? Jannah.
It's immediate access.
And when we come back, we deal with perspective on worldviews, and we want to engage that a bit more. But please read worldviews, right? When we come back next week, we're going to put up these lectures, so you have the notes now as we complete our third lecture, and all the notes go up until this week. Perspective of world.
It will be the next
All right.